during the first summer of COVID, where we were sort of like able to mix a little bit. I think pubs were open outside again or something, but we weren't in strict lockdown, but we definitely weren't performing. David Bates and Nuova Musica had the idea to do obviously something small scale, and some filming sessions to produce some online content, as everyone was doing. And yeah, he said, do you want to come and sing some Purcell songs? I think it was something he'd wanted to do for a while anyway, like a sort of a theme of a project, this idea of taking the best, it was called Purcell's Finest Verses, I think. And the idea of taking the best verses from like all these odes that aren't done in their entirety so often, and just highlighting those gems. So it was all really his idea to begin with. But Purcell is a composer I've been long associated with since my last Purcell album with Le Musicien de Saint-Julien and Francois Lazarovich. I never say it right. Sorry, Francois. Yeah, and I've been dying to do more Purcell because there's so much, and there's so much that's so good, and he feels like a home composer to me. So. Yeah, I think Purcell's always been in my musical landscape because it was always in church music, through the verse anthems and canticles and things. But curiously, as a soloist, I did very little in the beginning of my career because I wasn't really doing song recitals where you might sing Purcell songs, and the operas don't really give you much to do as a countertenor. They're not very expansive parts, so they didn't come up. And it was really only when Francois asked me to do this disc, I'd already had the idea that I wanted to do a disc about Purcell. And when Francois asked me, it all seemed to fall into place. And we've been singing a lot of Purcell ever since. I have done The Sorceress once. I did it for the Netherlands Bach Society some years ago. It lies on the high side. I think it's about, I can definitely sing it, but I think it's about what works best dramatically. Not to talk any of my countertenor colleagues out of a job, but I have a feeling that might be one that maybe is more suited to a mezzo. But there's always scope for variety and different types of voices trying these things. I think it's the breadth of the range. So if you've got someone who's very competent up top, you maybe don't have the real chest voice that you need for other bits of it. I mean, it's an ugly role as well, or it should be. I think it should be an ugly role. Whereas the spirit can be quite forthright, but also I think there's some form of purity to it is quite effective. Some of the Purcell was unknown until David introduced me to it in the first sessions. So the title track by Beauteous Softness, I mean, it's not the most unknown piece, but I actually hadn't heard it before. And it is, beautiful. The real discoveries for me were the John Blow songs, which I didn't know. Lovely Selena is just like the most charming song. Like, what a great and easy melody writer John Blow clearly was. And Paul Celadon is intriguing because it's just sort of this relentless hopelessness that still seems to enchant in some way. And I think it's also cleverly but simply done. I mean, I'm not sure if it's just the way I am and maybe my Englishness or what to the fact I'm a countertenor, but I think I've always found melancholy far more interesting than joy. And we're blessed with these sorts of songs because it really gives you a really rich vein to mine. But what I really felt about those songs during lockdown was that it wasn't necessarily about the sort of processing of grief and loss, although that was definitely part of it. I think it was more about making intimate music, although it was filmed for online content, but it felt more like it was for our own sakes. I think it was about rediscovering ourselves in sort of an unpressurized, simple and familiar way. I think this music, I've always said that Purcell feels instinctive. And I think it, because it's been with me for so long and it seems so ingrained, it's almost like my native musical language, I think. And I don't think that's just about the fact that it's written in English. I think there's something that I don't have to think about how I connect to the music, or it doesn't feel like a real hard piece of study to see how I think a phrase might have been meant by the composer. In a way that I know certainly in the beginning of my career, I fought a lot harder with Bach to sort of reach that point. It's hard to tell, isn't it? I think I touched on it earlier with John Blow. I think Purcell would have been hard pushed not to be influenced by his melody writing, which I think is, you know, extraordinary for its subtlety and beauty. And what's really nice about the John Blow Purcell connection is that there was clearly such an honest and deep affection between the two men, which is why we have that extract from the ode on Henry Purcell's death, which is the way he describes his loss at him being taken too soon, or that his time came too late. I can't remember the exact text, but it just feels so genuine and so touching that connection is just unavoidable, I think. With Pen and Humfrey, the thing I thought mainly about it, because with the divine hymns, I knew some of them, but not all of them before. But especially in the hymn to God the Father, we see the sort of freedom that Purcell uses in some of his songs, like The Black Dismal Dungeon, where the continuo gives you space to sort of be a bit more recitative-like. And I think that's a really important way of making the text especially come alive. So I think we can see that all these composers, despite their melodic skills, are really honing in on how we express that text. I mean, I remember some years ago, George Benjamin coming to a totally different era, who sets text impeccably, saying how he would recite lines again and again and again, trying to find that natural rhythm. And I think when I look at some of these, and he will obviously notate it in a very complex modern way where minutiae of rhythm can be expressed, but these composers will often write, you know, lines of quavers or crotchets, but there's no way, I believe, that we should be singing those rigidly. I mean, even if we do a simple intergal, we've still got the words suddenly come to life, and there's a spontaneity that makes these songs, I think, to me, really special as communicative tools. I mean, I think it's interesting that both composers turn to Shakespeare. I mean, Britten sets, I think there's only one line in Midsummer Stream that isn't Shakespeare's own. I can't remember which one it is, but I think that's that sort of niche pub quiz question. And I think it's that focus on text. I mean, I'm sure I remember reading somewhere that Britten was very much trying to play to Della's strengths as a Purcell singer, as a Dowland singer. And I think that is reflected in the text setting. Oberon has actually quite simple music, but it's the subtlety that you need to find. Again, same with the Purcell, the subtlety you need to find. In Purcell, you find subtlety, I think, to bring out beauty and bring out the odd corner of meaning. But in Oberon, it's far more intense, because this is a big opera. Oberon is a very complex character, I think. And when I'm looking for that subtlety in how Britten sets the text, I'm looking for, above all, the menace of Oberon, the danger of Oberon. He's I've always tried to hone in on that, because Britten obviously writes you beautiful music, but beauty can be dangerous. And I've sort of struggled with this because I've never actually done an original production of Midsummer Stream. I've always done revivals, so there's always a sense that you're inheriting other people's work. But I was developing my own thoughts about what I would do should a new production come along. And one of the things that I really honed in on was this danger and this sort of instability. I mean, Britain goes for it at the very beginning. You know, the world is in turmoil. There is this, and these are very powerful, magical creatures. But the real turning point for me was when I saw Emma Rice's production of the play at the Globe some years ago. I can't remember, quite a while ago. And Oberon was an abusive drunk. And I'm not saying we need to always go in that direction, but then suddenly his treatment of Puck makes quite a lot more sense. It's a very odd, the power imbalance, it's certainly abusive in some way. And you can find, I don't think it's going against Britten's intentions to find those corners in his music and the way he sets the text to just, because it's a subtle power, but it's a dangerous power.